All right, welcome and thank you for joining or watching the replay of the 2024 USS Nationals Seminar. I'm going to be your host for this. My name is Steve Coyne. I am an athlete, a coach, and I'm the U.S. state rep for Florida. Put on 2-3 shows a year, World's Strongest Manatee in March, Beast of the Bay this September, and also the USS Masters Pro Worlds in September, which will be an amateur event with the Amateur State Florida Masters Championship at the Fit Fest in Tampa Bay. So if you're looking for shows, they're all up on Iron Podium. But let's go ahead and jump right in to USS Nationals. Okay, so USS Nationals, you should know by now, June 8th, 2024, Denver, Colorado. It's going to be at the National Western Complex, hosted by Justin and Katie Menning out there in Colorado. A lot of people are really excited about this one. Obviously, it filled up very quickly. They've been adding spots periodically that are going real quick. So it's going to be a great show. Really looking forward to it. So let's talk about how we can maximize our time, our training, and get the most out of these events. So let's dive right in. Event one, the circus dumbbell. Okay, so we're going to kind of go over the clean, the press, the lockout, certain cues you can use, equipment, and programming. Okay, so dumping right into the clean. So when we're grabbing the bell, there's a couple different ways that we can go into the clean, but we don't want to off center our hands here. Okay, so we're going to want to grab right in the center with your strong hand. So if you're going to the right side here, we're going to cup the center. Right hand, off hand, right over the center. Okay. So most people like to do a hinge and swing. So just like a kettlebell swing, where you're going to pull under the center of your body and use your hips to blast it up. So, it doesn't have to be all like a big curl out in front. We can swing up to get into position on our shoulder. Now, of course, we can do anything we want to get it up to the shoulder. You can use both arms, but one arm only must be used to press from shoulder up, okay? But one thing at a time. We want to make sure that we get a good rack position. We can use that offhand to center and place how we want. Right now, there's a couple fundamentals of having this rack position. What we're going to look for is we're going to want our forearm parallel to the belt. So we don't want our forearm like sticking out to the side, out in front. We want some of the weight over it directly, but we don't want our weight supported on the arm. We actually want our weight supported on our trap or our shoulder. So I've got two examples here of a face rack and a trap rack. All right, so this is, again, weight is supported either on the left here, it's a lot right in the face, on the shoulder, or on that trap and back. Now, once you see elbow position, we're up pretty high. We don't want to be down low here. This guy looks like a strong presser, but we still want to have, good elbow position up. We don't want to press from down here, so the higher up we are and the higher we get that angle with the shoulder or the trap rack, the less we have to press, right? And if you're good at dipping under or jerking under, which we'll cover in a second, you have less room to go, right? So forearm, upper arm, parallel to the bell, trap rack, and face rack. Now let's make sure that we use that offhand to stabilize. Some people like it out in front. Other people like it way out to the side. Test out, see what works for you. This is going to be a common theme as we're going through the technique for some of these things, is there's not one way to do everything for everybody. So it's worth kind of going through a couple of these different options in your own training and seeing what works best for you. One thing that I like to recommend here is to reinforce the tension that you need in your upper back and arm, is to stick that back arm out and squeeze your back like you're doing a rear delt pull or a row here, to tighten that upper back so you create that connection all the way through to get a reinforcement and brace with that upper hand. With that dominant hand. All right. So now let's cover foot and head position. We want eyes to be up at the top of the dumbbell as we're looking up. Okay. So eyes are going to be pointed up here, keeping that elbow up nice and tall. So Martins has got a really awesome position here. Now, what we're looking for with the rack position, whether you're in that trap rack or face rack, is we want the center of the bell to be directly over your midline. Okay, so over the center of your hips. So let's use this example from Martins here. So if I'm going to draw like a nice little line down the center, that center of the bell is directly over his hips. Now, there's a couple of different ways to do that. The main two being hike hips to the side. So you can clearly see here, Martinez is pressing with his left side. He's got his left hip pushed out to the side. Okay. Now you can also stagger your steps a little bit, like a split stance, to create that hip angle. Now this is very easy to see. If you're recording yourself, you can like look straight in the center. And I don't really recommend looking at a mirror. I'd recommend, watching yourself on video, because we want to look up while we're doing that. But you can see, draw a line, on your phone or whatever you're doing, and see if that alignment matches up just right. Now, what's really important is with that position, a lot of people can get into the right position, hike their hips out to the side, but they lose that center alignment on the hip dip. So we're going to use our legs in this, obviously. Very few people can strict press these weights. It's not the point of the circus dumbbell lift. So make sure that if you're dropping your hips, you're starting in the right position, that they don't shift to center. We want to maintain that little bit of that shift, that alignment, so that we can punch the bell straight up and not out to the side. This is what it's all about. It's about how we get ourselves to the finishing position where it's over the center of our body and not out to the side. It's going to be much harder to catch out here than it is over, again, that perfectly stacked position. So hike your hips out to the side. You can stagger step your feet a little bit if that helps you out. Keep your eyes up at the dumbbell and maintain that hip position on the dip. Now on the lockout, I like the cue punch the ceiling. We want those knuckles going boom, right up. Now, there's a couple different things you can do with that foot position, but this all kind of comes back to alignment. Now, I want you to look at this line. I'm going to draw right here. Shaw does this so excellently. Look at that straight line that's over the center of the bell and the center of his hips. He's got a little bit of a lean away to cause that. Now, that's probably what you're going to need to do. As you punch up, you're going to want a little bit of a lean away as you keep looking up at that bell to finish under and then straighten out. Now, simultaneously, what's going to happen is you're going to want to split your feet in the right position. So if we're talking about this, a very heavy one-sided movement, dip, punch up. If we're way out here, if it's just over that like right shoulder and nothing else and not your whole center of gravity, it's going to be very hard to lock out. So what you might want to do is to split your pressing side foot out to the side so that you maintain the same alignment, the same way we're shifting our hips out. That right foot kicks out if you're pressing with your right hand to maintain that alignment straight up and down. Okay, so slide press, side foot out to create balanced position. Now, if you have an Olympic lifting background, or if it's something you want to work in, you can also jerk under. That's, here where you're getting up and you drop your body down and catch in that jerk position. We're going to see this in action in just a second. Again, remember, lean away, stand tall. Now, I am a big Mitch Hooper fan, but if you've been keeping up with World's Strongest Man, some of these lifts were in contention. And I want to bring this here as an example of what 99% of the time is not going to be called a good rep. And this is absolutely nothing against Mitch Hooper, because as an athlete, you should remember this. If you are going to get a rep called good that most people would not consider a good rep, that's on the judge. It's not on you. Okay. However, you need to expect high standards for a lockout. And that looks like this right here, standing tall. Shaw could look at his judge right in the face. Mitch Hooper here, still leaning away, does not stand fully tall. He's still got the rep, not on him. But you should never expect that you're going to get this lockout position in a competition. Okay? Judging is a separate matter. You should never train for that. If you happen to get away with it in competition, good for you. Okay? Now, when we're programming, we want to make sure we're prioritizing skill over strength. This is such a technically advanced lift. It is currently slotted as the first lift for nationals, but it's also important to go through first because there's really a lot of moving parts in this. So it's going to be worth technical practice doing things like multiple reps, EMOMs every minute on the minute, so you can still keep some semblance of repetition and skill practice in there while getting, again, intensity up and working through it. Shoulder stability. There's a lot of different positions that this belt could end up. We talked about all those variabilities with your hip position, your rack position. Belt could go here, 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 here. So it's good to do some things that make sure your shoulder is strong and stable in different positions. Now, that could include things, like the bamboo bar banded, where you have bands hanging down from the barbell or your bamboo bar, and it's unstable on the way up. You could even do some of that with a dumbbell. You could have band in your hand tied to a kettlebell down low to practice. You can do all sorts of overhead kettlebell work, moving your arm around just to get used to different positions. But it's important that you have some semblance of shoulder stability, because not every rep is going to be perfect, especially when you get fatigued and you get tired. Okay. It's important to make sure that you're strong and stable, even in maybe some of those compromised positions. Now, mobility, we talked about leaning away a little bit. Work some things like kettlebell windmills, where you're training to have that flexion on your side in case you do have to take a big lean away. You're ready to get here and not only have the mobility to do it, but the strength to stack and straighten out. Okay. This also means mobility in your overhead reach, your thoracic mobility. If you can only lock out in front like this here, you're never going to be able to stabilize the dumbbell. So let's make sure we can get in that strong upright position again, so we can be stacked vertically over all of our strong joints and have the best finishing position. Now, peaking, straightforward. Ramp your weights up going into nationals. It's going to be a waste of time to just train heavy, 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 heavy going all the way in. So prioritize skill over strength. Start working towards that comp weight close to competition. Okay. One technique that I have used successfully for me is an overload. So that's using a heavier weight than what you might be acclimated to or what you might use, just in a position to where you can hold, get it out of a rack. I personally at a CrossFit gym, I put it in the loop that some hanging, gymnastic rings were on, put the bell right in the center, positioned my body under, and stood up with it. So I was feeling heavier weight in my hand at the lockout. So in theory, but also in application, I mean, it's a mental thing as well as physical. You're holding heavier weight than you're used to or need to stand up tall, lock out, so that when it's time to use that same weight or lesser weight, it's going to feel a lot easier and lighter to move and manipulate. You can also do the same, just go into your rack position, maybe try some, really heavy holds, trying to get that position right. So when it's time to do some dips, press, punch up, you're using a weight that feels lighter because you had that overload work in at the beginning of your workout or earlier in your block. Equipment on this one, almost all equipment is allowed. We got wrist wraps, shoes, belts, elbow sleeves, grip shirt, and chalk. One thing I want to mention on shoes is another thing where kind of personal preference plays out. A lot of people like flats or lifters. It's kind of where your strengths are. I personally think that a lifting shoe with a little bit of that heel really helps get that dip position a little better, where you can keep your feet flat, drop at the knees and keep your chest upright. But it's up to you. If you have really good ankle mobility, maybe flats give you a better connection to the ground. Could be totally up to you. Now with wrist wraps, let's talk about, I'm going to revisit this slide here, a couple of these. So you can see Rob Kearney has doubled up on his wrist wraps. So he's got a little bit of a protective shield on his forearm, because some of these bells, now the Slater bells might be different, but not everybody can train with those. You might want to have a wrap here. So when you have the weight of that bell in there, you've got a little bit of protection on there. Now it does harden up and callus over time, but don't be afraid to either get longer wraps or 1, 2, double up. So you can have that extra little, again, brace there. So you can even see too, double wrap. Looks like a lengthier wrap than normal. Okay. So use those wrist wraps, good for wrist stability and more. All right. Belts seem to help a lot for me, but again, a lot of this is personal preference. I highly recommend that elbow sleeve just to get a little bit of extra, drive and tricep extension out of there. Grip shirts help really well to get that nice sticky placement, especially if you happen to get sweaty or wet. It's good to help fight that off. Chalk, use chalk. My opinion, can't miss. Better grip on your shirt. Use it. Okay. So I've included this video in here from Alexei Novikov just because this guy is really such a stud at this, and he does a lot of these things that I'm talking about really well. But before we even start this, dip, foot position kicked out. And you can already see before I start this, look at this alignment, center, right over his hips. He's leaning away and he jerks under. But let's watch this in actuality now. Okay. We'll skip back just a notch here. So you're going to see that swing up to the shoulder. You can see how that bell is sitting on, right? Again, forearm is parallel to that bell.
20 seconds in,
do that dip. He also jerks and dips under while leaning away at the same time. Heads up, looking at the bell. Off hand about to stabilize. Amazing. So we'll just watch this for a second and go through it. Hip, hinge, swing, hand stacked.
And that's 5.
Well, I said 6.
Watch the hip hinge here, swing, and now watch his feet as he dips out.
5 reps, plenty of time on the clock.
6th attempt.
You can see how much. I'm going to watch that one more time. You can see exactly how his right foot kicks out again. I'm going to watch this one more time. And that gives him that perfect finishing position to where it stacks perfectly over his hips. Look at this. He kicks that right foot out. Boom. Nice straight alignment over his hips. Okay. Let's move right into the yoke walk. So we have a couple important parts of this. Obviously, first is the pick, just getting it up off the ground. The walk, transitions, super important. Then we'll hit equipment and programming. The yoke walk, all right? So how to pick and walk. Now, yoke height, we want to find this balance where we're saving as much energy as possible, picking it up off the ground. So we're not going to be squatting it from as low as possible. It's not the event, but also enough room to where we're not going to be scraping the ground, okay? And this matters where your feet start because, here, this gentleman here could be a little close. Looks like he's going to be okay, but, if he was down one more, he'd be scraping the ground with that start right away. Okay, so this is kind of strategy, something you're going to have to play with on your own and figure out exactly where you need that based on your foot starting position and the weight that you're using to get the best pick and walk start. All right, now hand position. Hand position really does two things. One, it's going to create a shelf on our upper back, like when we're squatting, but it's also going to stabilize the yoke. Okay, now I think that a lot of people try this technique where, we see this a lot in World's Strongest Man, where some on your back and people have their hands seemingly lower down here. Now that does do a good job at pushing the yoke frame forward, right? So that can kind of get some stability there where you can, walk with the momentum of that little bit of push forward, prevents a little bit of swinging in and out. But what people fail to miss a lot of times is, when we go back here, like the mobility of a lot of these guys and these big yokes, I mean, they're first off huge guys. Mobility is usually not fantastic. So what that ends up meaning is that they cannot get into a really good, strong rack position. Like there's no way. Who's that? Stoltman there, right? He can never get his hands on the bar like this. So, you got to also kind of play with the blend of, are you able to get your hands on the bar here to stabilize and push out? Or, or are we going to work to find the strongest, best back rack so we can squeeze our rack, somewhere again, a back squat to where we're nice and tight, because the yoke, we really want a lot of full body stability, head to toe tension. So when we're getting in position, what you'd want is to know where your hand position is at, step forward under the yoke, create that big stretch through your chest, which will tense your back muscles, get you that tight shelf, keep your hands in position, bring your chest up position, so then we're kind of creating the top down effect. So we start by, again, chest stretch, stepping through, hands in position, back tight, getting under, setting our feet, getting tight and going. Okay, so this technique does work well if you can get your hands, stabilized, right? Even too, if you're running with a lighter weight, like this weight at Nationals is relatively light for you, maybe you could get away with, I'm in a narrow rack position, standing up a little taller and moving quick so that you're avoiding any of that swinging. But what I think you should emphasize, no matter what you do, is having that, again, stable, hard back brace. So there's kind of two positions here, trap rack and back rack. This really is coming down to low bar versus high bar. It's almost same thing. We can walk with it either up tall on our traps or a little more down on our back. Now, the reality of yoke is that this is a heavy weight on our back no matter what we choose. So both carry a little bit of risk in them. Now, the trap rack, when it's straight on top of those traps, is going to be creating a lot of pressure just straight down on your spine. Okay. But the back rack, when it sits a little lower, more on our shoulders, so you can kind of see this here. This is up high. Brendan's back here. This is Wesley. It's more like on the back of his shoulders. When we're doing back squats or low bar squats, there's a little bit of that like forward lean inherently. We're going to have to kind of hold there and stay in that position as we walk forward. Right now, if you've got a very strong back, this might be no issues whatsoever. But if you have a weak mid back, weak low back, where you're trying to hold that position where you're slightly tilted forward, this might not be the play for you at all. So play with these things, know what's reasonable for your competition weight, but you can do either or. Okay, it's very successful going either way. Now we can also start this in two ways: squat start or sprint start. This also comes down to kind of where is this weight at for you? Is this something you can move pretty well? Then you might want to start with a little bit of a sprint start where you're in, a staggered stance. You can do a little bit of a step into the movement to get it moving. Otherwise, if you're more concerned about just getting it moving at all, you might want to start with a wider foot base, like a nice wide leg press where you just have to press it up a little bit and then step in, stabilize your feet, and start walking. But if you can move right out of a staggered stance, get moving right away, you're going to save a couple seconds instead of squatting up, brace, putting your feet in, and then starting and going. You can kind of start from that moving start right away. But again, this comes down to how heavy is this weight for you? How stable you are walking, right? We kind of covered all these stability and mobility considerations. That really kind of comes back to, how can you place your hands and arms on the upright? Walk and transitions. So this is very important in all strongman competitions. You want to minimize your time on transitions, okay? So what does that mean? That means like the rule set here is you're going to start under the bar before you get the go command. At the very start, you're going to start under the bar. You're going to go down 50 feet. The front of the yoke frame has to cross the line, and then you're going to get out of the yoke, get back under, take it back down. Okay, so 2, 3, 4 seconds. I have a feeling that this is going to be a pretty quick event for a lot of people. So it's up to you to save some time on practicing your transitions very quickly. Okay, this is something you should be doing in training pretty regularly. If you know that you're going to have a great time moving that yoke, then it's time for you to really work on those transitions. But prioritize this. If the yoke is a huge, tough, taxing event, then you're going to be smarter off ensuring that you have a better, just stronger yoke pick, even if you take a second or two. Okay. But always make sure that your pick, no matter what, even if you're doing a really fastest possible turn, you're still doing it fundamentally sound. So back to the point, you should be practicing this in training pretty regularly. Avoiding slides. Right? So there is a penalty for slides. You need to make sure as the athlete that you are not going to do that. Now, there's a few things that you can do for that. One, ask your judge for clearance, where your lines are. You should also monitor this yourself. But, if you have to walk all the way through the line, having your judge tell you done time will make sure that you're not stopping early and just like thrusting, sliding the yoke over the line. Okay. Very straightforward. Now, also size up the surface that we're going to be on. If we're on a expo hall surface like this, where it's pretty slick and smooth, and it might slide kind of regardless, you just need to plan ahead that you're going to do whatever it takes to control it. And that's something that you should be doing in warm-ups to see and monitor how it slides. Because a lot of people will be skilled at this, but will still make the mistake of just going too fast. The yoke's going to slide with them. And even if they're still under pretty good control, they will get a deduction for a slide penalty. It will happen, guarantee it. You'll see it. Okay. Drop only if necessary. This comes down to stability. If you're shaking all over the place, drop, reset. You're going to kind of have to make that decision on your own. Make a wise choice. Like, should you slow down and stable out and keep walking, or do you just need to reset entirely? If the yoke frame is moving real erratically or even side to side, you might be able to come in and stabilize a good bit. However, you need to be careful of sometimes going side to side. If your feet are going to cross over one another, where we're looking at like a potential big injury risk, then might be wiser just to reset. Something probably went wrong with some of your pick or your walk that's leading it to be unstable. So if that's the case, it's probably going to be worth to set down, pick right back up in a better, stronger position and go. All right. Programming, prioritize speed. You should be moving around as an athlete. This is a very heavy movement based day in Denver. So should be doing some running, should be doing some cardio that requires you to move quickly and light on your feet. All right. Overloads similar to the dumbbell. If we're getting, working up in pretty heavy weight, it's a good mental trick. There's also physical benefits to this, to having some heavier yoke picks, picking something heavy up, even if you don't walk it, or even if you walk with like a couple feet, to try that heavier weight and then go down to your training sets, or your lighter weight, just so you can feel much lighter and much faster. Plain and simple. If my comp weight, I believe, is 650. So if I were going to do just a pickup with, like, let's say 750 or so, I go down to 650 to train for my comp weight. That's going to feel so much lighter than because I just had that heavier weight. It's going to give me just a good peace of mind and comfort to move quickly with my weight. Practice transitions. We just covered that. You really got to be good at your transitions. That is one area that will save you so many points on the leaderboard. Just do it. Okay. Things you can do to practice transitions: more picks. So if you're pretty good at walking 50 feet with your weight, maybe take it down a little bit, practice, 15 to 20 feet, but you set, pick up, go back, set, pick up, go back, set, pick up, go back, da, 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 da. So you know that you're going to have that mastered skill down of the pick. But you can also train longer distances. Again, if you're good at this 50 feet, if you train regularly in 60 to 70-foot distances, oh, well, shoot, 50 feet is nothing now, right? So train hard, compete easy. Be mindful of fatigue. Yoke is incredibly taxing. It's a full body lift. There's a lot going on. So just be mindful. Good programming strategy that we'll cover later in a little more detail is to, potentially cycle events in and out. So, possibly 1 week you might do yokes, another week stones, back and forth for a block. So you're still going to get like a pretty good amount of volume over your training block on both of these events, but without like just crushing yourself on yoke every week. Okay. You can also just train lighter, modify your intensity. So you're not going heavy yoke all the time. You go heavy 1 week, light for speed the next, heavy for speed, heavy, light for speed, back and forth. Because otherwise, if you're going heavy yoke all the time, you're going to get just fried. Okay. Cues. I like saying hips and nips as headlights. All right. So think of this square here. We want to be facing the direction that we're going to go. So these things are always staying square, even if we're turning around. You have this like thing in your mind that I need to, turn here. The body and the yoke will follow. Okay. Steady steps. Walk steady. Try to keep it moving, 1 foot in front of the other. It's all you got to think about. If it feels hard and heavy, just keep walking steady. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. If you can, quick feet. Steady is more important than quick. Okay. Stay tall, stay tight. This goes back to the rack position we talked about. We want to make sure that we are tense, full body, head to toe. This is just fact. The tighter and tenser we are in these groups, the more braced we are in our full body, the stronger that our system is going to be. So stay tight. Squeeze that yoke bar. Think about really popping your chest up nice and tall and proud so you can keep that back tight and back. Okay? Stay tall. Don't let that weight fold you over. Shoes, hard sole versus soft sole. I think a hard sole is the way to go, but I'm not, the end all be all authority. Just reason being, there's a lot of weight that's going straight down on your feet. Okay. So you want something where you can have the biggest amount of power output through your foot for each step. If you have a soft sole, even if it's, something closer to like trainers, there's still a little bit of a squish in there. That's in those shoes on purpose, for comfort. It's not quite like a runner shoe, but to use that for example, runner shoes are intentionally soft, so there's a bunch of cushioning, but squishes every time. So you do not want that. You want something that's hard with hard contact in every single step. Belt, but plural, possible S. You are allowed a soft belt and a hard belt. Okay, now this I do highly recommend because we want to always have that full body brace, but this could be pretty restrictive on your breathing. Just make sure you're training with this and make sure you're breathing. All right. Typically for this, it's going to be hard to get a lot of like big, deep breaths in, plus with adrenaline of the show. Your heart rate's probably going to be up. So it'll be hard to get those, deep calming breath. If you need to, I would recommend even like a powerful just inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. It's going to be a relatively short time. At most, it's 60 seconds. So just make sure you're breathing, even if you have to force it like a little more violently and quickly, like that. Okay, knee sleeves and wraps are allowed. Highly recommend using them mostly for stability. Some people like those knee sleeves. Just make sure they're not so tight that you can't get, a good knee flexion bend in there. Grip shirt allowed once again. Absolutely recommend. Just going to help that bar sit a little better on your back. Chalk. Chalk is great all the time. Definitely use it. All right, moving into the deadlift. So we'll have a little bit more time on the deadlift here because there's a little more technique here that we can go over that's applicable to all strongman training. In this event, they're all dead stop reps. Okay, so you guys stop at the bottom. You actually have an up command and a down command every time. Then we're going to cover event strategies for this deadlift. So a little bit of a technical overview. Deadlifts are a hinge, not a squat. Okay, so we want butt back, chest up, not knees down. Okay, not a knee bend, but a squat. These are things that you should honestly know already, and I don't want to make you feel bad if you don't know what some of these things are, but please message me. We can talk more about this, but you should know what a hinge is. You should know how to pull the slack out of a bar. Even though that this is a power bar deadlift, there's still going to be a little bit of slack that you can pull out. All right, so make sure that when you go down and grab the bar, whether you're strapped in or not, we want all that weight tight against our arms, our upper back, while our chest is lifted, butt's in position, and we're braced nice and tight. Okay, bracing. Core helps a lot with bracing, but this also can be done through pulling the slack out. That's a very good cue mentally to, like, again, feed that chain top to bottom. Or if you're tight against the weight, head up, chest up, shoulders back, nice and tight, where you feel that weight in your arms. Should be able to just press strongly through your legs at that point. Create that connection and brace that core nice and hard. All right, now lockout. Let's revisit this point again. You should never expect to get a soft lockout call, ever. Okay, happens sometimes. If so, so be it, whatever. But that is very rare. Should never expect it. We all know what a good lockout is. Legs extended, hips extended. So quads tight, butt's tight, chest up, shoulders back, head through. Okay, it's not shoulders rounded here. Even if your hips and knees are extended, it's still not it. Head up, chest up. Okay, now head position is important. A lot of people get this wrong, I think, because a lot of people set up in their deadlift position at the start and they look up. Okay, but what we're doing when we do that is we're stretching the top of our spine out while we're putting it under load. So we want to create a neutral, not flat, a neutral spine position. So if we're hinged over, we're going to want to try to find that line where our spine is going from tailbone to the back of our head flat. So what that might look like, in Q form, is pretend like you're holding a tennis ball between your chin and chest. So you'll actually be looking slightly down and in front, about 45 degrees when you're in that head position. But as you stand up, as it holds there, we're looking straight ahead. You should be able to look at your judge straight ahead. You can also use your head as a good lockout cue. You can get some power to ramp up as you slam your hips forward to extend, and also snap your head back like you're headbutting somebody behind you to create that kind of whip effect as your hips go forward, head goes back. Create a little more drive and acceleration into the lockout. Okay, thumbs in contact with bar. That is a specific rule set, whether you're using straps, figure eights. There's some people who have sometimes figure eights where they're just holding bound by their fingertips here. So that's specifically not a rule, or that's specifically a rule rather for USS Nationals. Thumbs have to be in contact with the bar. This is me here. I have a good grip on my fingertips there, but you can see clearly fingertips in contact with the bar. Same with Big Eddie here. Dead stop reps. So hinging down versus resetting. This is what I mean by this point here. So some people are going to want to kind of free fall the weights. Now, no, first off, says if you intentionally just free fall, drop, or slam the weights, you could get DQ'd. So be mindful of that. But even if you're not free falling, you're lowering a little bit under control, you can either go back into your hinge position, top down, or you can kind of lower without any sort of fall and have to reset every time at the bottom. So that's a waste of energy if you have to drop the bar down, reset, go, rip up. Instead, you can kind of keep your chain tight, hold tight, wait for that up command, and rip right back up instead of having to reset every time. Now, that's not really going to happen all the way through perfectly, but for your first few reps, if you're going to be repping this out pretty good, you're going to want to be able to conserve energy. Now, near the end, when you're taking some breaks here and there, like maybe you got to take a few seconds, you might have to. That's okay. But right out the gate, you should not have to be resetting every time. Stay tight, wait for the up command, and maximize time. Okay, so if this is an event where you think you're only going to get maybe 5 or 6, you should kind of know and have a game plan in mind in advance, what that number is, and not go 100 miles an hour right out the gate. Pretty simple. If you're going to get 5 or 6, you might have a better time doing one every 5 to 8 seconds. Take a breath. One, take a breath. One, take a breath. Instead of trying to just hit 5, boom, 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 go. You're going to empty your gas tank right away, and then you're gassed out. So think about using that whole time frame to get those reps in. Take a break if you have to, if that means you're going to have energy to do 1 or 2 or 3 more for your whole set. Okay? There's a whole lot of accessories that go into, building a deadlift. And as you know, this is kind of the fundamental, cane movement of strongman. So much comes from posterior chain power that you really should have a good deadlift. Period. There's nothing else to be added to that. So I have these kind of broken up into 2 categories. We're going to start with strength accessories first. So you can also look at these as skill or positioning accessories, which we'll cover in a second. But a lot of times there's just a weakness in the chain. Deadlift is a full body movement. So sometimes it could be like, oh, my low back, like my hips shoot up before anything else. Or like, oh, my upper back is rounding like crazy when I deadlift. So, try to be intentional when you're analyzing what you need for where you can go. So these are just a whole bunch of examples. If you're missing some strength in your lower back glutes or hamstrings, so glutes might come into play when like you can't lock out, you can't get that final little bit of hip extension. That might be all hamstrings, right? I'm sorry, that might be all glutes if your hips can't finish and extend. So you might want to do some glute ham raises, hip thrusts, kettlebell swings. Okay. If your low back's shooting up early, that might be hamstrings. You might want some good mornings or some RDLs, stiff legged deadlifts. If your low back is having a bad time, hyperextensions, reverse hyperextensions, right? So that's a skill thing. Strength thing you can attack right away. If you're losing that tension in your upper back, you're starting getting that cat back where your upper back is rounding, maybe some rows, some shrugs, lat pull downs, pull ups, reverse flies. Skipping a few here, coming down to cable crunches. Sometimes it's up to your core strength. Think like eventually, sometimes we're going to get in compromised positions. So let's make sure that we're strong in compromised positions. Back to the thing with shoulder stability at the circus dumbbell, you could be here, 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 here. But if you're used to having some, stability to stable out, you're going to be in a much higher chance of success than if you didn't train for that. Okay, so cable crunch. If we're going to go in, if you happen to get a position where you're starting to round your back on deadlift, train for your core to be strong in that position. So we can do a standing cable crunch with a little bit of a hinge, crunching in, so that if you're here on your deadlifts and your back is rounding over pretty aggressively, your core is still going to be pretty tight, keeping you safer and stronger, even if that happens. Okay, really like that move. I think it's vastly underrated. Check it out. Performance accessories. Again, analyze based on need. People have different strengths and weaknesses. You might be very technically sound, but you're having a problem in one specific area. So this would be a time to look at some of these things here. If you're having a hard time pulling off the floor or breaking ground, try deficit deadlifts, reverse banded deadlifts, plyos, just jumping explosively, leg press. That initial break off the ground is very quad and leg heavy if you are braced correctly. So work things that are going to have that leg power in it. Okay, mid shin to mid thigh. Positional. Get as close as you can to some of these positions and train it stronger. So that could be a block pull right at or near the spot that you're weak at. Rack pull, pause deadlift, isometric deadlift. That's where you're pulling against like a rack or a fixed object where you need to create and generate more energy. Okay, lockout, banded deadlifts, chain deadlifts, hip thrusts, Dimmel deadlifts. Maybe last one, speed and power. If you're just slow, train quicker. All right. Plyometrics, jumps and sprints. CAT, compensatory acceleration training. This is a technique that says that, generating force is mass times acceleration. F equals ma. It's a physics principle. So if you need to generate more force at heavier weights, you can use lighter weights and move them faster to generate higher force, which will then give you the ability to produce higher force at heavier weights. Okay. So that usually comes in terms of like 60 to 70% of your 1 rep max for things like singles, doubles, triples, and clusters, kind of rapidly repeated sets and doing them explosively. Okay. Trap bar deadlift, another good one. Triple extension movements like throws, just to generate that like fast twitch, explosiveness, all work great. So programming, we kind of just hit a lot of this, but really program based off need. Are you having a strength issue, a speed issue? Do you need to just run like a standard like periodization block to increase your strength up for this? Or are you having some speed problems? Do you need accessories based on strength or skills? This is very individualized. So I will give you a copy of these notes. If you shoot me a DM, just let me know. You can get a list for all these for what you need. Okay. Equipment, belts, shoes, suits, straps, sleeves, baby powder. Again, almost all equipment is allowed here. There's no metal lifting hooks. They always say that. I don't know why. Shoes, you're not required to wear shoes, but you must wear socks. Okay, no blood on the bar. Don't scrape it up. Deadlift suits are allowed. Now, this is not about suits. That's a pretty advanced technical thing, and we could take all day long talking about those. But if you have a suit or can get one and can train in it, really only going to be to your advantage. Check it out. Straps are allowed, whether you use the figure eights or the classic figure nines. Totally cool. Knee sleeves work great, but for some people, they get in the way, of the bar. So if you want to use knee sleeves, you can. Make sure that they're not going to be blocking and the bar's not going to come rake up against them and literally hit the brakes by rubbing against your sleeves. In a similar vein, put some baby powder on your thighs so that you can just ramp that bar right up. So it's not going to be chafing against your skin, slowing down against your thighs, on your shorts, whatever. Okay? Moving on, we got the sandbag, shoulder, carry, and load. All right, so a couple different parts here. We got the pickup, shoulder, carry, load, and event strategies. Now, when we're picking up sandbags, alignment and centering is critical. All right, we want to make sure this will also apply to stones. We have a nice alignment with our scapulars, center of the bag, and the balls of our feet. Okay, so whether we're picking this up hot dog or hamburger, you can call it long or wide, doesn't matter. We're still going to want that, whether again, we're picking up lengthwise, going around the center, or wide, long, wide. We want this as centered as possible. All right. Get a little light for me here. It's starting to get sunlight over here. All right. Now, grip. Since we can, sandbags are malleable here, try to dig in a little bit so you got a little bit of pick under. We're not just sticking to the sides. We don't want to just pick here. We want to grab in, grab and go. All right. So again, you can pick it up lengthwise. I just put hot dog, wide, hamburger, or Husafel style. Okay, now that is where you're going to have the bag upright, tilt it forward, get in a hinge, stick it against your chest, and pick up straight from there. So it's already like at your chest for the Husafel style pickup. Okay, totally valid option. You have to forgive me. I'm on the water load here for my current competition, so I got to finish my drinking here, which will cover water loading and cutting very shortly. Okay, sandbag, shoulder, and carry. So if you can one motion the sandbag, it's going to save you a lot of time. You should just do it. Okay, roll violently into your chest, throw your hips into it at the same time, roll right up to the shoulder. Okay, now there's a couple different positions if you're going to go to your lap that are going to benefit you. So you can either go around, over, or staggered. Okay, so I'll show you down here a little bit. So more staggered would be like down here. So we have, if I'm going to my right shoulder, might go right hand, right about 40% of the way up on the bag, left hand cupping the bottom so we can stand all the way up. Now, a lot of this kind of comes down to individual bag sizes because we're all going to be a little different. So sometimes you might be better doing this way on a small bag, that way on a big bag. And that's for you to know going in. So make sure you're trying these different things in your training. Once again, a lot of different ways to do these, a lot of different ways. So make sure you're trying all of them. Okay. We want the bag, though, regardless, to be in as close as possible to your body. We don't want any gap space between your body and the object. Keep it pulled in nice and close. A lot of contact. Same with your arms. There shouldn't be like a bubble of air around you, especially on sandbags. They're malleable. You can squeeze in. So look at this guy in both of these pictures. He's grabbed all the way around, and sandbags actually molding around him a little bit, even though they're packed pretty tight. Okay, so get that nice strong hand position wherever you're going to be. Get that back into you and extend your hips like you're trying to jump up violently. Okay, balance and brace. So as we're going to be carrying and loading, it's important to make sure that we're balanced here. Okay, if you got to use that second hand to balance and hold tight, great, go for it. Okay, once you're there, haul ass, get it down, dump it over that yoke bar. Very straightforward. Now, if you are on the shorter end of things here, you need to be very smart and intentional about what you're doing to load. So a lot of us are going to be able to just walk, and just dump and turn. We don't have to like pick up or anything. But if you're a shorter athlete and you've got a relatively high yoke bar, you're going to maybe need to go up on your tippy toes. Maybe you need something like boots that's a couple extra inches to help you load over. You need to be prepared. You need to be training so that you know what the height is that you're going over, so that there's no surprises of how you're going to do this at game day. Again, we got to practice multiple techniques. So there's a lot of different ways that this could go depending on the shape and size of the bags. Bags can be filled with different materials. You just got to be ready for all things. It's up to you as a competitor to leave no guesswork. So you're like, oh shoot, it's a long bag and I only practice with the like short, small, round ones. Well, unfortunately that's on you, right? Supportive gear and footwear, a lot of variability here, but this one could lend some people to using more trainer style shoes where you can run a little quicker. Kind of depends on personal preference. Same with things like belts and elbow sleeves, right? So, if you want to wear a belt for bracing, that might help. Other people find that it gets in the way of their sandbags. You're just going to have to know that. You have to try out these things in your training so you know what works for you. All right? Don't waste time. This is a 60-second event, I believe. If not, maximum 90. Don't waste time. Haul ass. Get after it. If your conditioning sucks, start working on it right now. Okay? Hold nothing back. You should not leave an event like this where people are going to be running and sprinting and finishing it real quick. You should not be leaving this thing thinking I could have gone faster. This is the last thing you want. Trust me. No regrets on this one. Lastly, chalk up. I personally like liquid chalk for sandbags, especially for events where there are multiple sandbags where it might pop off or you never really know what kind of surface you're going to be using or what's on the bag from your previous competitors. Chalk up, go crazy. I think you should look like one of those people that just took a bath in liquid chalk or just regular chalk, So moving right into the Atlas Stone over bar, same thing. We've got a couple things: pickup, load extension, tacky, and event strategies. Similar to sandbags, hand, arm, and foot position. So same alignment as we saw our guy on the sandbags. Center line over the balls of your feet, your scapulars, and the center of the object. Now, it's important that we have your hands in the center too, because even a little bit forward or backwards, it's going to roll out. It's going to roll forward or roll back, even with a little bit. Okay. Now, some things like tacky can help mitigate that, but tacky should be a bonus and an addition to your training. It should not be the thing that saves you from sucking, to put simply. Okay. Your technique needs to be good. All right. And we'll go into some strategies to train for this. You need to make sure that you're good at stones before applying stuff like that, because it's not really going to help that much in the long term. It's going to be a 10x effect if you're already good at them. When we're picking these Atlas stones up, let's make sure that we hinge. We want to deadlift, don't squat. Again, if you don't know what that means, ask me, DM me, no shame. But this is a hinge. Look, butt back, chest up like he's getting ready for a deadlift. See where his butt position is? He's not dropping down like he's squatting. Okay. Brace through the weight. This is the same thing, same concept as getting the slack through the bar. Okay. Get your body tight to the object. So your arms are tight, your back is tight, your chest is tight, your legs are tight by bracing against the stone. This is another technique that we can use to make sure that things like our biceps stay safe. So we're not jerking into it, don't have any snaps or tears or anything like that. All right. I like the cues of long arms, strong wrists, open hands. So arms are long. We don't want to pick up, in a curl position. We want long, strong wrist, bent in to create that hook, open hand. Get the surface area nice and wide and dig in on the stone. Okay. Just more surface area of everything. Your forearms, your arms, your chest, your hands, the bigger surface area. This is much weaker than this, a spread palm. The more surface area we have, the better chances of succeeding at this you will have. Now, a couple different things we can do on the load. Again, like the sandbags, there's some crossover here, and you should know this and implement this in your training. Two most popular ways are over and around. So this is a little more of an around position. This is a little more of an over. So one of the benefits of going over is that you can extend a little higher. So as you're coming up, if you're already over, come up, 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 and roll up, and you can get it up onto your chest. You just have a little more to go if it's down low to roll up. Okay, but both work really well. And again, this is another thing that you need to figure out with the stone that you're using at competition. You should know the size, you should know the shape. Practice during warm-ups if you don't and you can't, but figure out what's going to work best for you. Make sure that we're tight with it. Again, we should always be braced through this object. So even in our lap position, keep it squeezed in nice and tight, chest strong, core packed tight. So we're in our strongest, best position to explode and load. All right. Leave no gaps between the body and stone as well as possible. As much surface area as we can of everything on the stone. All right. Again, it's not a fixed, it is a fixed object. It's not malleable like sandbags, but still try to get as much of your chest, as much of your arms, as much of your hands on it as possible. And when you're going to load, look up. When you look up on an Atlas stone load, you're giving yourself extra room to extend all the way through. Okay. So if we're extending here and I'm looking up forward at the bar, there's still gap here that I have room to extend. Instead, if I stick my chin up, I can keep coming up, 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 up for extra height. It's just that simple. Look up. Look up. Look up. Get your chin out of the way. Now, tacky is allowed at this. So it would be foolish to not use it, plain and simple. Right? There's several different types of tacky. Wet tacky from Will Ramirez, great stuff. Check out Will Development. Hard tacky, lots of people sell it. Now, one thing that's difficult with hard tacky is preparing and spreading. So be ready if you have to heat this up. That can mean using hot hands and some Tupperware with your with your hard tacky. Some people I've seen use a hair dryer, literally just blow it on and blow dry it, just keep it, get it warmed up because it is hard. Okay. Be prepared to start spreading and mixing around. We want this all on those forearms and on those hands. Also when you're training, things you got to do so you're ready, have some available on the back of your hands or back of your forearms so you can just get a little glob. If it rips all the way off on the stone, you can get a little glob, rip, 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 so you can, and load up because it will pull off. Tape and sleeves. A lot of people do like tape and sleeves on these. I use tape with tacky over it. I think it just gives me a better grip, but this is ultimately up to you. I have personally no experience with leather sleeves on Atlas stones, but a lot of people really like them. It's worth looking into. If you got a buddy that's got them, try them out. Event strategies. Stay in rhythm. You can reasonably expect that you're going to be able to load a stone pretty periodically. So try to, be in your mindset of like rhythm. Going to load 1, 2, load 1, 2. Try to think about the rate that is coming back to you. Be in rhythm with your technique. If you're going to lap and load, try to every rep be the exact same. So this is an automatic process. We want to be, that way we're just thinking about it less. Okay, we can apply ourselves to having a higher level of performance by taking our head out of the game and just being in rhythm. If you want the stone returned to you in some specific way, tell your spotter. I don't know what that might mean, but up to you. Okay. Footwear, height considerations. If you're short, maybe an inch or two lift and some boots or something will help you. Otherwise, I like hard-soled things for explosive lifts. I like my lifters. If you like your flats, again, there's nothing wrong with that, but know what is best for you. Like the deadlift, pace appropriately. Use the full clock. If you're somebody that's struggling with only a couple reps on this, just focus on one at a time. Don't worry about what those people did in front of you. Worry about what you're going to do. But if you're ready to rip and you're going to be somebody that's getting many reps, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, pace appropriately so you're not just doing a bunch of quick ones right out the gate and gassing out immediately. But hit the gas near the end if you can. All right. Lastly, know and trust your technique. This is not the time to see that person in front of you like, oh man, they did that way. I should try that. You need to do what works for you and worked for you in your training. All right, so let's just cover a little bit of programming here. This is kind of a general overview. Please feel free to reach out and message me with further details on this. We're going to start with the 7 granddaddy laws of training. Okay, so law of individual differences. If you look at all the pro strongman, I'd like to give the example of Hafthor Bjornsson and Rob Kearney, 7 feet tall, 400 plus pounds, 5'9", maybe 300 pounds. Those two guys need to train completely differently based on their body types. Their technique will be different. Their recovery abilities, their body's response to things will be different. So that's the same for you and me. That's the same for me and him. You and her. It's all different. So make sure when we're applying these things, whether it's techniques, strategies for programming, you are taking what is best for you as the individual. Okay. A lot of people bought like the Hafthor Bjornsson deadlift peaking program to peak their deadlifts. But the fact of the matter is, again, none of us are built or live like that guy. So while there's important things to learn from that, that's probably not the best strategy for you to maximize your deadlift. Okay. So that's the law of individual differences. Next, we have the overcompensation principle. Put simply, Mother Nature is going to overcompensate for stresses. Okay. So if you are constantly lifting heavier and heavier weights, Mother Nature will overcompensate with gains. Okay. Now, how do we get that overcompensation? Is with overload. That is specifically saying that we have to overload our muscles beyond what they're used to in order to get that overcompensation effect. The overcompensation effect, again, is where we're going to have, the training result of being stronger by overloading. Okay. The SAID principle, specific adaptations to imposed demands. You can train your muscles in all sorts of different ways. If you only do eccentric training, like a curl, for example, where we slowly lower, your muscle is going to adapt to growing bigger in a slow pace. But, let's actually use something more like a squat. That's a better example here. If we train regularly on squatting lower and slower regularly, you're just going to be getting real good at squatting slow. Instead, if we do things like jump squats, or if we squat, down to the bottom and explode up, we're gonna get better at developing that like fast twitch muscle. Okay, so make sure when you're doing your training, you're giving it the right stimulus in order to meet those demands. All right, the use disuse principle. If you don't use it, you lose it. If you build a bunch of muscle through hypertrophy and you don't use those muscles anymore, see you later. It's very simple. All right. Gas principle, general adaptation syndrome. All right. Now, this is essentially your body's going to adapt to heavy training loads over time. But in order to get some of these things like overcompensation that we're achieving through overload, it's going to adapt to being in states of high fatigue. So we have to follow up these high intensity periods with low intensity periods in order to maximize these results. Specificity principle. You're going to get better at squatting by squatting. You're not going to get better at squatting by leg pressing. You're not going to get better at running marathons by biking. It's just that simple. So make sure you're using these when it comes to your training. Just some ideas for your programming and how you're going to do these things. Again, prioritize skill acquisition. All this stuff is very, very technical. Make sure that your technique is sound. Prioritize it. General physical preparedness. You need to make sure that your body is ready to handle the stresses and demands of these lifts. So extra conditioning, extra cardio, maybe some higher volume within reason is appropriate. If you're starting to get too fatigued, take it to a deload, a period of lighter training so that your body can catch up. Cycle techniques in your training if you need to. So we talked about all these kind of different things like sandbags. There's a couple different ways to pick them up, a couple different ways to carry, load, etc. So, try a couple different things early on in your training to figure out what is the strongest way for you to do these things, but also so that you have a plan B and plan C if you show up and it's now this type of sandbag or that type of sandbag, then you won't be, up the creek, right? Make sure you attack your weaknesses first. Pretty straightforward. Prioritize where you are lacking, right? Very simple. This also is true with warm-ups and mobility. Make sure that your body is physically ready here, like GPP, but also make sure that's mobile enough to do these lifts. So if you cannot even get down to the ground to pick up an Atlas stone, or you can't get a lean away position for the dumbbell, those are things that can be addressed and worked on that attack your weaknesses, acquire skill, and get you physically ready. So warm-ups and mobility cannot be missed. Okay, comp dress rehearsal. I personally like going into competition to tailor things to the Saturday workout to where that's a pretty intense high volume day so that we're getting pretty close, to the training demands of, to the competition demands. So since we're going to be running through like 5 full blast events, it doesn't really make sense to, kind of train going into it with your body getting used to like one really like lazy lethargic Saturday. We should, train our bodies and its cycles appropriately so that it knows Saturday is the day we're handling all this volume and getting after it. So as you get up closer to comp, maybe do a full run through. Could be 80 to 90%. I don't think it would be great to go 100% just to minimize, risk of injury and over fatiguing yourself. But, run through some of these things because if you're going through in order, the deadlift might feel differently after the yoke. Stones might feel differently after sandbags. So you're going to have a better idea of how that's going to go as you get closer to competition. So this is just kind of a programming sample. This will be something that's got a little more focus on the circus dumbbell, for example, which most people have told me is their overwhelming need on this. So day 1 and 3 are kind of some different examples. So circus dumbbell for skill, or something you might do light and EMOM, and then circus dumbbell heavy, where you might work up to a couple top heavy sets, right? Now, these are complemented with tricep extensions, push presses, windmills for mobility, just standard shoulder press just to address more pressing power, and upper back work. So that's kind of what your day 1 and 3 look like. And then day 2 and 4 are kind of your more well-rounded, strongman days. So sprint works to work on your movement and general physical preparedness. Same with plyometrics. Deadlifts, front squats, 2 essential good strength builders. Need-based accessories and core to follow up your deadlifts. And then I have right now yoke and stones or sandbags, but these are things that could kind of flip in and out depending on where your need are. Okay, so again, worth cycling techniques, maybe doing 1 motions 1 week, lap and load the next, et cetera, et cetera. Now, when we're going into this competition, there's a couple things that, again, let's say training goes well, you could still kind of botch things showing up. It happens, okay? One of the most important things is to keep following your routine. This is not the time to try some, new spicy Thai joint down the street the night before. Okay, you want to make sure that we're eating foods going into the competition that fuel you best for training. That if I have beef and rice, the night before, I always feel great when I work out the next day. Then that's probably a good, strong thing to have before your competition, right? Now, this is not all going to be, I'm not going to really go much into weight cutting and nutrition, but you should have a plan for this. If you know that you're nowhere close to cutting weight, do something, to making your weight, do something about it. All right. It's not really a good time to try your first major water cut. Maybe it is, but I highly suggest asking a qualified professional to help you with that, or just cutting weight normally without a water cut. but this is not somewhere where I'm going to kind of break that down in depth. Just know where you're at far enough out so that you're not doing anything super drastic that's going to ruin your performance. Okay. Getting ready. Watch other competitors, but don't compare yourself. So sometimes it's worth to eyeball some of these other guys online, girls online, whatever, see some of the way that they're doing things to learn then. All right. This is not watching other competitors at competition and then mimicking their technique then, because that's not going to do anything for you. They've been doing that for 8, 10, 12 weeks or longer to get ready for this competition. But if you see, like, oh, I saw this person trying this out, and then you go try it in your prep and you're still 6 weeks away, you could pick up a huge, 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 bonus way to lift something that's going to change the game for you. So it's worth watching what other good people are doing and taking notes. Okay. Plan ahead, but be adaptable. So this kind of comes back to, you could have different equipment. Something could go different on comp day. So if you have these plan Bs where it's like, well, I was expecting it to be a round sandbag, but it's actually not, great. Good thing you've been trying these other techniques. So, oh, well, no problem. I'll just do that. Okay. So don't be so rigid on one thing or another, because we've all been in competition. So we know it almost never goes perfectly. There's always a thing or two that is I don't want to say wrong, but is not as portrayed. And that's nobody's fault sometimes. It's just how it goes. All right. Plan ahead, expect the best, prepare for the worst. Very simple. Check your equipment. Make sure that you are ready with all your gear. It's going to be a bad time if you get out there like, oh, I forgot my knee sleeves. Oh, I forgot my belt. Double, triple, quadruple, check all your stuff. Make sure you got it. And your training, prioritize your recovery. That's really where the gains happen. We all know this. Sleep, nutrition. You have no excuse as an athlete to not be on top of that. Visualize your performance. See yourself doing these things successfully. Don't give yourself anxiety wondering like, oh, what if I do awful, blah, blah, blah. Think of it as a great example I've heard before is like the roulette wheel is once you kind of do that and show up, like it's most of the work has already been done. So why would you sweat over a bad training block or outcomes that you just can't accept when that only harms you, right? So the work has been done. Think of it as roulette wheel in motion. The ball's going to drop where it's dropped. You've done the work, you've done the training, trust in yourself. Let the ball drops where it does because of your performance. Do your best, but plan for it to be successful in advance. While going into competition, decrease your stress. There's a lot of different ways to do that. Could be a prayer, stillness, or meditation practice. Could be just prioritizing your recovery, getting some daily sunshine, doing things like avoiding negative people, avoiding the news, avoiding things that are inflammatory. It's just going to help you overall. You'll be in a better headspace, but also it's going to allow you to sleep better, feel better, and just be better across the board. Lastly, manage your caffeine. Caffeine is a performance enhancer, but if you're just having it all the time, you're not really getting much of a boost out of it anymore. So, try to drop that down a little bit so that you can successfully use and utilize it on game day for a little bit of a boom bump up, right? Very simple. Mental prep. We already covered this. Visualize regularly as specifically as possible. So there's been many studies done and many top athletes do this. You can find millions of examples that, visualizing something intensely gives your body and nervous system the exact same response as doing it in real life. This works for everybody from, chess athletes and even somebody that talks about it very regularly, Benny Magnuson and Eddie Hall, two of the best deadlifters in history. Right? They say they put themselves in that moment where they were deadlifting those world record weights. They did it so many times in their head over and over and over and over and over and over again that it was just like doing it for the 1,000th time when they did it in reality. It's just repetition. You can do this with all these other techniques that we talked about as well. Find some stillness, some quiet space, and see yourself going through the motions. Could be your yoke transitions, It could be your sandbag techniques. Try to visualize and really strongly concentrate how that bag feels in your hands, how the pickup feels, how it's going to feel on your chest, your arms, how you're going to load it. Think about how that yoke feels on your back while you're walking with it. Try to think about every little possible detail. That unmistakable smell of ammonia, chalk, some bodily fluids, like we all know what competitions smell like. It's not great. So think about those things and play these scenarios and get yourself in the mindset of being used to success so that you have a better chance of succeeding all the way at competition. I highly, highly recommend a meditation practice for none reason. Well, two main reasons, I guess, is one, meditation lowers anxiety. We all want that. Two, meditation gives you the ability to shift your train of thought. So if you're really distracted, something's going on, can't shake something out of your head, you have the trained ability to center to where you need to be. Something could happen at competition that really pisses you off, but then it's your time to lift. So what are you going to do? Just sit there and continue to be pissed off about it? Or are you going to get your mind right and get ready for it? Are you going to set the tone here? Right? Setting the tone happens a lot of different ways. That's in your head, but it's also things that trigger positive things. That could be a certain song that you play to get you hyped up. That could be some positive triggers and switches. Okay. We all know a lot of our famous bodybuilders, their favorite phrases, this and that. Ronnie Coleman, yeah, buddy, lightweight baby. When he says stuff like that, it's just on. It's just on, bro. He says that before he goes to deadlift 800 pounds, but that's the trigger and the switch in his mind that says like yeah, buddy, I'm ready. Let's go. Whatever happened before this, it doesn't matter because the switch is on now. Okay, so whatever you got to do, if it's some of these triggers, whether it's your mindset, you set the tone and you set your environment and charge it how you want it to be. But it's not just about in the moment, it's about having this as a regular part of your life. So when you're getting into competition prep, maybe it's worth going out of your way to be around positive people, good places that uplift you and get you in a good state of mind, good positive place. If you're showing up to somewhere, wow, that person always pisses me off, avoid them, cut them out. Not worth it. Not worth your mental space. You go to a gym that plays terrible music, pack your headphones, mitigate whatever you can. Okay. Charge your environment. The placebo effect. You probably all know this one, but belief is the most powerful thing that exists out there. Infinite studies show this, that people can be given sugar pills and told they have these miraculous properties, and it ends up working just because of belief. So why would you not believe in yourself to be successful? It's that simple. Believe you're going to be successful. Believe that your training is paying off. Believe that what you're eating is correct. Now, don't do this just mindlessly. You should have a good analytical mind. If things are not working, you should still have the self belief that you are capable and able to do these things, but be adaptable enough to change when things are going wrong. Just have that belief that's backing you that you will figure it out and you will get there. Okay. This also comes with self limiting beliefs. We all have heard these people who say, well, like, oh, well, I suck at log. Oh, my deadlift's great, but I suck at, yokes. Da da da. Those are the type of things that actually do impact you. So even if you think that's where you're at now, you can change your language by saying, I'm getting better at. Okay. That's a pretty big, stark difference. If you're, even if in jest or in joking, you always say like, oh, I suck at circus dumbbell. Well, that's just kind of creating a layer over and over in your head that you're telling yourself that. Doesn't matter if it's joking. You're making it more real the more you joke and the more you say it. So be mindful of where those self-limiting beliefs are. Change your language. Use these positive triggers and switches to get you out of it. And most importantly, practice all of these things with as much focus and intensity as you practice your training, your technique, and your strongman. This is an area that a lot of people just leave out and they're missing out on an absolutely critical part to success. It's just that simple. All right, that concludes the 2024 USS Nationals Strongman Seminar. I really appreciate you watching, checking this out. I hope that you found some of these tips useful to apply to your training. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at Stephen M. Coyne, STEVENMCOYNE. On Facebook, make sure you join the Florida Strongman Club on Facebook. Look for my events on Iron Podium down here in Florida. Get out there, compete. Come say hello at Nationals. I hope your training goes great. Go crush it.